I was not kicked out with a slam. My stepfather did it with a smile. Behind him, Mom slid my place card off the table like a used napkin and handed my seat to my sister's fiancé. A man they had known for 6 months. I did not cry or argue. I simply walked to my car and sent the text I had been saving. 5 minutes later, their perfect Thanksgiving fell apart because the house they were so proud of was never really theirs. My name is Jasmine Parker, and by the time I turned 29, I had learned that the most dangerous things in life do not come with warning labels. They come with smiles, freshly pressed linen napkins, and the smell of roasting turkey drifting through a crack in the door. I was driving a silver Honda Civic that had seen better days, navigating the winding roads leading up to Cedar Ridge, Virginia. The trees were bare, stripped by the late November wind, standing like skeletons against a sky the color of bruised iron. On the passenger seat beside me sat a bottle of Pinot Noir. It was not a cheap bottle. I had spent $45 on it, a ridiculous amount for someone on my budget. But I had bought it because I knew my stepfather, Gordon, would inspect the label before he even poured a glass. If it was cheap, he would make a joke about vinegar. If it was decent, he would simply nod. I was buying a nod. I was buying 3 hours of peace with $45 of fermented grapes. I gripped the steering wheel tight enough to turn my knuckles white. My stomach was a knot of cold anxiety, a sensation I had associated with this driveway since I was 10 years old. The mantra playing in my head was simple. Get in, smile, eat the turkey, compliment the house, leave before dessert. Just one last time. I had promised myself this would be the last obligation I fulfilled before pulling away for good. I just wanted to survive the afternoon without being the punchline of a joke I wasn't supposed to hear. The house appeared around the bend. It was a sprawling colonial revival, painted a pristine, creamy white with black shutters that looked like they had been polished by hand that very morning. The lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life. It was the kind of house that belonged on the cover of a magazine about gracious Southern living. It projected warmth, stability, and success. It was a lie, of course, but it was a beautiful one. I pulled into the long driveway, parking my car at the very end, far away from the other vehicles. This was habit. Gordon hated when my clutter blocked the view of his Mercedes. I saw my sister Kelsey's bright red convertible and, right next to it, the sleek black sedan belonging to Evan, her fiancé. They were parked close to the house. Welcomed. Integrated. My Honda looked like a delivery vehicle that had lost its way. I turned off the ignition. The engine ticked as it cooled. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the recycled air of the car, trying to steady the tremor in my hands. You can do this, Jasmine, I whispered to the empty car. It is just dinner. It is just 3 hours. I grabbed the bottle of wine by the neck, stepping out into the biting chill of the afternoon. The air smelled of wood smoke and decaying leaves. I smoothed down my coat, checking my reflection in the side mirror to make sure my hair was neat. My face neutral. I looked calm. I looked professional. I looked like nothing could hurt me. I walked up the stone path to the front porch. The wreath on the door was made of dried autumn berries and cinnamon sticks, tasteful and festive. I could hear muffled laughter coming from inside. It sounded warm. It sounded like a family. For a second, a foolish, childlike second, I felt a pang of hope. Maybe today would be different. Maybe the holidays would soften them. I reached out and rang the doorbell. I heard the chimes echo inside, followed by footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. The door clicked. It did not swing wide open. It opened just enough to reveal the man standing on the other side. Gordon Price stood there. He was wearing a cashmere sweater the color of oatmeal and dark slacks that held a perfect crease. He looked healthy, wealthy, and utterly immovable. He did not step back to let me in. He did not smile. He simply filled the frame of the doorway, his hand resting on the jamb, effectively blocking the entrance. "Gordon," I said, forcing a smile, lifting the wine bottle slightly as an offering. "Happy Thanksgiving. I brought the Pinot you liked last year." Gordon looked at the wine, then up at my eyes. His expression was placid. There was no anger in it. That was the terrifying part. Anger implies passion, a loss of control. Gordon was perfectly in control. "Jasmine," he said. His voice was level, smooth, the voice of a man who explains loan terms to people who cannot afford them. "You are not family." The words hung in the cold air between us. I blinked. My brain refused to process the sentence. It was too absurd. I had grown up in this house. My mother was inside. My last name might have been Parker and his price. But I had been the one scrubbing his floors and polishing his silver for 15 years. "Excuse me?" I asked, my voice sounding thin. "You are not family," he repeated, not raising his voice a decibel. "And this is a family dinner." He shifted slightly, and because the door was still ajar. I could see past his shoulder. I could see into the dining room. The chandelier was lit, casting a golden glow over the table set with the good china. The ones with the gold rims that I was never allowed to touch as a child. I saw my mother, Janice. She was standing by the sideboard, adjusting a floral arrangement. She was wearing a silk dress that shimmered under the lights. She looked up and saw me standing in the cold, blocked by her husband. She did not look shocked. She did not rush forward to push Gordon aside and pull her daughter in from the cold. She smiled. It was a practice smile. The one she used when neighbors complimented her garden. The one that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was a smile that said everything was going exactly according to plan. My eyes darted to the table. I saw the seating arrangement. There were 5 chairs, one at the head for Gordon, one at the foot for Mom, 2 on one side, 1 on the other. I saw the place card on the solitary chair. It was ivory cardstock with elegant calligraphy. It read Jasmine. "Mom," I called out, my voice cracking slightly. Janice turned to the table. She reached out with a manicured hand and picked up the place card with my name on it. She didn't crumble it. She didn't throw it away. She simply slid it off the table like it was a napkin that had been placed there by mistake. She slipped it into the pocket of her dress. Smooth and efficient. Then, she pulled the chair out, the chair that had been assigned to me. "Evan? Honey?" she called out, her voice bright and musical, ringing clear through the open door. "Sit here. The light is better on this side." Evan, my sister's fiancé, was standing near the kitchen doorway holding a glass of scotch. He looked towards the front door. He saw me. He saw Gordon blocking my path. He saw the wine bottle in my hand. He saw the look of absolute devastation on my face. For a moment, he hesitated. He looked uncomfortable. He shifted his weight, glancing from me to Kelsey, who was pouring water into the glasses. Kelsey didn't look up. She was busy ignoring the scene, a skill she had perfected over 2 decades. Evan looked back at the empty chair my mother was patting. It was a warm seat. It was inside. It was safe. He lowered his eyes. He turned his back to the door and walked toward the table. "Sure, Janice," Evan said, sitting down in my spot. "Thanks." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. I stood on the porch, the wind cutting through my coat, watching a stranger take my place at the table, while my mother poured him water. Gordon leaned in closer to me. I could smell the roast turkey on him, mixed with the sharp scent of his expensive cologne. It made my stomach turn. "Don't make a scene, Jasmine," he whispered. It was a command, intimate and chilling. "Today is a holiday. Don't ruin it for your mother." The audacity of it hit me like a physical blow. He was locking me out of my childhood home, erasing me from the table, and yet he was ordering me to be the one to maintain the peace. He wanted me to fade away quietly so they could enjoy their stuffing and cranberry sauce without the guilt of my presence. My throat burned. 1,000 screams clawed at the back of my tongue. I wanted to smash the wine bottle against the doorframe. I wanted to scream until the neighbors looked out their windows. I wanted to force my way in and demand to know why I was being discarded like trash. But then I looked at them. I saw the tableau they had created. The perfect family, the happy couple, the benevolent parents. They looked like a painting, a painting that had no room for a flawed, struggling, non-compliant element like me. If I screamed, I would be the crazy daughter. I would be the unstable one. I would be exactly who Gordon had always told everyone I was. I tightened my grip on the neck of the wine bottle until my fingers ached. "Okay," I said. The word was so quiet I barely heard it myself. Gordon looked surprised. He had expected a fight. He had prepared for tears. He wasn't ready for acceptance. I didn't give him the satisfaction of another second. I nodded. Once, sharp and precise. Then I turned my back on him. I walked down the porch steps. 1, 2, 3. Behind me, I heard the soft click of the latch engaging. He hadn't slammed it. He had closed it gently, politely, firmly, the sound of a vault locking. I walked back down the long driveway. The gravel crunched loudly under my boots. The only sound in the oppressive silence of the neighborhood. The wind whipped my hair across my face, stinging my eyes, but I didn't brush it away. I reached my car and opened the door. I tossed the $45 bottle of Pinot Noir onto the passenger seat. It landed with a thud against the upholstery. I slid into the driver's seat and pulled the door shut, sealing myself inside the cold metal box. The silence in the car was different. It was my silence. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the steering wheel. My hands were shaking now, violent, uncontrollable tremors. My breath was coming in short, jagged gasps. The humiliation washed over me, hot and suffocating. They hadn't just uninvited me, they had replaced me. They had staged it. They had let me drive 2 hours just to show me that I was interchangeable, to understand why I sat in that freezing car with a digital detonator under my thumb. You have to understand the ecosystem of the house behind me. You have to understand that in the Price household, love was not a renewable resource. It was a finite currency, minted by my mother and distributed by my stepfather. And the exchange rate was rigged against me from the moment Gordon moved his golf clubs into the hallway closet. I grew up as the tolerated child. My sister, Kelsey, was the cherished one. It was not something blatant like in a fairy tale where one sister wears rags and the other wears silk. It was far more insidious because it was plausible. It was the way the light in my mother's eyes would dim just a fraction when I entered the room, as if my presence was a bill she had forgotten to pay. Mom, or Janice as I had started calling her in my head years ago, had a memory like a steel trap, but it was selective. It was a weaponized archive of my failures. She could recall with high-definition clarity the time I spilled grape juice on the white carpet when I was 8 years old. She could quote the exact tone of voice I used when I was 13 and slammed a door. But she had a convenient, aggressive amnesia regarding anything I did right. When I graduated cum laude, she frowned at the program and asked why I wasn't summa cum laude like the neighbor's son. When I secured a full scholarship that saved them $40,000 a year, she sighed and said it was a shame the school wasn't closer to home so I could help more with the garden. When I spent my weekends scrubbing the baseboards because Gordon liked them dust-free, she would walk past me and comment that I had missed a spot near the outlet. I was the draft horse. Kelsey was the show pony. Kelsey's C- was a sign that the teacher was unfair. My A- was a sign that I wasn't applying myself. Kelsey broke a vase, and it was a funny story about her clumsiness. I broke a glass, and it was evidence of my inherent carelessness and lack of respect for other people's property. Then there was Gordon. Gordon Price did not yell. Yelling implies a loss of control, and Gordon was the patron saint of control. He used order as a whip. He weaponized the concept of a happy family until it felt like a prison sentence. His favorite method of discipline was the heavy sigh, the disappointed look over the rim of his reading glasses, and the line that carved itself into my psyche. "Jasmine, you are ruining the mood." If I cried because my feelings were hurt, I was ruining the mood. If I pointed out that Kelsey had lied about where she was, I was being divisive and ruining the mood. If I existed too loudly, laughed too abruptly, or expressed an opinion that clashed with his conservative worldview, I was pollution in his pristine environment. So, I learned the art of shrinking. I became an expert in making myself smaller. I learned to apologize before I even knew what I had done wrong. Just to preempt the lecture, I learned to gauge the atmospheric pressure of the living room the second I walked in the door. If Gordon was reading the paper with his jaw set tight, I disappeared to my room. If Mom was clattering dishes in the sink, I picked up a towel and started drying without a word. I smiled when they made jokes at my expense because if I didn't, I was too sensitive. I swallowed my anger until it turned into a hard, dense stone in my gut. I became a ghost in my own life, haunting the hallways, hoping that if I was quiet enough, they might mistake me for furniture and let me stay. I left that house the minute I turned 18. I didn't run away. I just faded out, moving to a dorm, then a cheap apartment, then a better apartment. I built a career based on the very skills they had forced me to develop: hypervigilance and an obsession with documentation. I work as a senior compliance officer for the Bright Hollow Compliance Group. It sounds boring to most people, and that is exactly why I love it. In my world, feelings do not matter, intentions do not matter. "I didn't mean to" is not a legal defense. At Bright Hollow, we have a saying etched into the culture: if there is no paperwork, there is no truth. I audit risk. I look for the cracks in the foundation that people try to paint over. I find the emails people thought they deleted. I find the missing receipts. I find the truth buried under layers of corporate politeness. It was the only way I could make sense of the world after growing up in a house where reality was whatever Gordon said it was on any given Tuesday. But the real fracture, the break that couldn't be reset, happened 1 year ago. My grandfather, Frank Whitfield, died. Grandpa Frank was my mother's father, but he was the only person in that bloodline who looked at me and saw a person, not a problem. He was gruff. He smelled like old tobacco and sawdust. And he hated Gordon. He tolerated Gordon for my mother's sake, but he never bought the act. When Frank looked at me, he didn't check for dust on my clothes. He checked to see if I was standing up straight. When he passed, the grief was heavy, but the administration of his death was where the nightmare began. The funeral was beautiful. Gordon handled everything. He stood at the pulpit and gave a eulogy that moved the congregation to tears. Talking about Frank's legacy and generosity, he held my mother's hand. He looked the part of the grieving, supportive son-in-law perfectly, behind the scenes. However, he was moving pieces on a board I wasn't supposed to see. "I am just helping your mother," Gordon had told me when I asked about the estate lawyer. "She is too distraught to handle the paperwork. You know how she gets. We don't want to burden her with tax codes and probate hearings." It sounded reasonable. It always sounded reasonable. But my compliance brain, the part of me that hunted for lies for a living, started twitching. I noticed little things. Items from Grandpa's house disappeared before the inventory was taken. "Frank gave that to me years ago," Gordon would say about a set of vintage tools or a rare coin collection. "He wanted me to have it." When I asked Mom about it, she would look at me with those watery, tragic eyes and say, "Jasmine, why are you doing this? Gordon is taking care of everything. Why do you always have to look for a fight? You are being so difficult." And there it was, the gaslighting loop. If I pointed out a discrepancy, I was paranoid. If I asked for a document, I was greedy. If I questioned Gordon's authority, I was attacking the family's stability during a time of grief. They rewrote the narrative in real time. By the end of a conversation, I would be apologizing for asking why Grandpa's truck was suddenly registered in Kelsey's name. "He wanted Kelsey to have a safe vehicle," Gordon said smoothly. "You have a car. Why are you jealous of your sister? It is unbecoming." I wasn't jealous. I was suspicious, but I had no proof. Just a gut feeling and a lifetime of being told my gut was wrong. That was when I changed my strategy. I stopped arguing. I stopped asking questions that put them on the defensive. I used Grey Rock emotionally, and I used what I'd learned at Bright Hollow tactically. I became a recording device. Every time I visited, I took photos of documents left on the counter. I saved every voicemail. I archived every email. I noted dates, times, and inconsistencies in a physical notebook I kept locked in my car. I wasn't doing it for revenge. Not at first. I was doing it to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. I needed to look at a piece of paper and say, "This happened," so that when they told me it didn't, I could anchor myself to reality. I watched them relax. When I stopped fighting back, they thought I had finally broken. They thought the training was complete. They got careless. Gordon left folders open. Mom talked about bank transfers on speakerphone while I was in the next room. They assumed I was too beaten down to notice, or too stupid to understand the financial mechanics they were employing. And that is how I found it. It wasn't a dramatic moment in a stormy attic. It was mundane. I was helping clean out Grandpa Frank's home office 2 months after the funeral. Gordon had already swept through the place, taking the important papers, but he was lazy about the trash. He had left a box of what he considered junk for me to shred. In that box, tucked inside an old manual for a lawnmower, was a copy of a letter, not just a letter, an instruction to his attorney, dated 3 weeks before he died, and attached to it was a draft of a codicil to his will that Gordon had evidently decided did not exist. I sat on the dusty floor of that office, reading the words my grandfather had written. The trembling started in my hands then, the same trembling I felt today in the car. He knew. Grandpa Frank knew. He had written, "I do not trust Gordon Price with the welfare of my granddaughter Jasmine. I have seen how she is treated. The house in Cedar Ridge and the bulk of the liquid assets are to be protected." I shoved the papers into my shirt. I didn't shred them. I took them home. I scanned them. I sent them to a lawyer I hired 2 towns over, a man who didn't know Gordon and didn't care about his country club membership. I found out the truth about the deed. I found out the truth about the trust, and I made a choice. I could have run in waving the papers right then. I could have screamed, but I knew them. If I revealed my hand too early, while the legal transfer was still in the murky gray waters of probate, Gordon would find a way to spin it. He would claim I forged it. He would claim Frank was senile. He would use their combined social capital to bury me. Worse, if they knew I had the power to destroy them, the cruelty would stop being casual. It would become calculated. They would stop treating me like a nuisance and start treating me like a threat. So I waited. I let them think they had won. I let them transfer the titles. I let them spend the money in their heads. I let them plan this perfect Thanksgiving dinner in the house they thought they had successfully stolen. I needed them to be so confident, so arrogant in their victory, that they wouldn't check the locks on the doors they were closing. I drove to this dinner today knowing exactly what I was walking into. I knew they were going to be cold. I knew they were going to be mean. But I didn't expect the blockade at the door. I didn't expect them to physically erase me. I thought I was coming here to drop a bomb on the dessert table. I thought I would sit through the meal, endure the insults, and then, over pumpkin pie, slide the folder across the tablecloth. But Gordon, in his infinite arrogance, had handed me a better opening. By kicking me out, by denying me a seat at the table, he had removed the last shackle of guilt I had. If I had eaten their food, if I had accepted their hospitality, a small, weak part of me might have hesitated. I might have felt bad about ruining the holiday. But I wasn't family. He said it himself. And since I wasn't family, I didn't have to follow the family rules of silence. I was just an external auditor now. And I had found a major compliance violation. I looked at the phone in my lap. The file had been sent. The silence in the car was no longer the silence of a victim. It was the silence of a judge waiting for the verdict to be read. I thought about the years of, "You're ruining the mood." I thought about the scholarship Mom forgot. I thought about the chair that was given to Evan. And for the first time in 29 years, I didn't feel small. I felt enormous. I felt like the storm Gordon had always been afraid of. "You wanted a mood, Gordon?" I whispered to the windshield. "I will give you a mood." I rolled down the window slightly. The cold air rushed in. I could hear the faint sound of music from the house. Then, I heard it. Inside the house, a phone chimed, then another, then a third. The ripple effect had begun. The truth had just arrived at the dinner table, and it wasn't wearing a polite smile. It was wearing the cold, hard facts of legal ownership. I leaned my head back against the headrest and closed my eyes, visualizing the scene I couldn't see. I knew exactly who would check their phone first. It would be Kelsey. She was addicted to screens. She would see the notification. She would tap it. She would frown. Then Evan, the unsuspecting pawn in the chair that wasn't his. Then the silence inside the house would change. It would shift from the comfortable silence of exclusion to the terrified silence of exposure. I wasn't the daughter they tolerated anymore. I was the landlord they hadn't paid. An eviction notice had just been served. The decision to drive to Cedar Ridge that day did not happen in a burst of courage. It happened in the produce aisle of a grocery store at 7 p.m. on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I was standing in front of a display of prepackaged salads, debating between a Caesar kit and a Cobb salad. My basket contained a rotisserie chicken, a bottle of sparkling water, and a single slice of pumpkin cheesecake from the bakery section. It was the sad starter pack for a solitary holiday. I had fully intended to spend Thanksgiving in my apartment, wearing sweatpants, binge-watching crime documentaries, and pretending that the fourth Thursday in November was just another day on the calendar. Then my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. It was a message from Sienna. Sienna is my cousin, my Aunt Paula's daughter. In the topographic map of my family, Sienna was the only safe harbor. She was 5 years older than me, loud, unapologetic, and the only person who ever rolled her eyes when Gordon started one of his lectures on fiscal responsibility. She was the one who used to sneak me candy when my mother put me on diets at age 12. I looked at the screen. Come tomorrow. The text read, "Please, I am saving a seat for you." I stared at the words, the fluorescent lights of the grocery store humming overhead. My thumb hovered over the keypad. I wanted to type back, "I can't, I am sick, I have work, my car broke down." I had a dozen lies ready, all of them easier than the truth, which was that I simply did not have the stamina to be treated like an unwelcome guest in the home where I grew up. I started to type, "I think I am just going to stay low this year." 3 dots appeared on the screen immediately. Sienna was typing, "Do not let them win by default." Jasmine. She wrote, "If they do anything, if they say one sideways comment, I will not pretend it didn't happen. Not this year. I promise. Just come. For me." I looked at the rotisserie chicken in my basket. It looked pathetic. It looked like surrender. I thought about the file on my computer, the PDF with the deed, the voicemail from Gordon. I thought about the secret I was carrying, the one that burned in my chest like heartburn. If I stayed home, I was just the bitter daughter hiding in her apartment. If I went, I was something else. I was a variable they hadn't accounted for. I deleted my excuse. "Okay," I typed. "I will be there at 2. I put the chicken back on the warmer shelf. I wasn't buying dinner anymore. I was buying ammunition. The next morning, I dressed with the precision of a soldier putting on armor. I did not wear the comfortable sweater I usually wore to family gatherings, the one that made me look soft and approachable. I chose a structured navy blue dress that I usually wore for board meetings. It was tailored, sharp, and professional. I wore heels that clicked loudly on hardwood floors. I put on pearl earrings, real ones, bought with my own salary, and applied red lipstick. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like poor Jasmine who needed advice on her career. I looked like a woman who billed by the hour. "You are going there to close a chapter," I told my reflection. "You are not going there to beg for a spot." The drive to Cedar Ridge usually took an hour, but today it felt like a time loop. Every mile marker triggered a memory I had tried to repress. I passed the exit for the mall, and I remembered the Thanksgiving 3 years ago. I had been sitting at the far end of the table, the spot usually reserved for high chairs or unexpected guests. Uncle Wes, Gordon's brother, had been loudly recounting a story about his boat. He had paused, looked down the table at me, and asked, loud enough for everyone to hear, "So, Jasmine, still doing that paperwork job? When are you going to get a real career like your sister?" The table had laughed, a polite, devastating ripple of amusement. "It is a compliance job, "Uncle Wes," I had said, my voice small. "It pays well." "Compliance," Gordon had chuckled. "Carving the turkey." "That is a good word for you. Jasmine, you are very good at doing what you are told." I had smiled. I had swallowed a piece of dry turkey, and I had smiled because that was the rent I paid to sit at that table. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Not today. Today, nobody was going to ask me about my paperwork job without hearing exactly what that paperwork proved. I turned onto the street leading to the house. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet that costs money. The lawns were brown but neatly edged. American flags hung limp on front porches. I saw the house. It loomed at the end of the cul-de-sac, white and imposing. My stomach gave a familiar lurch, a Pavlovian response to the architecture of my childhood. I pulled into the driveway. There were already 4 cars there. I saw Gordon's Mercedes. I saw my mother's Lexus. I saw Kelsey's red convertible and Evan's black sedan. There was space near the garage, plenty of room for my Civic, but I didn't park there, without even thinking. I steered the car to the very edge of the property, parking on the street near the mailbox. It was a habit drilled into me since I got my license. Don't block the driveway. Jasmine, guests need the good spots. Don't clutter the front. Jasmine, your car leaks oil. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, hating myself for parking so far away. Even now, armed with the truth and a legal strategy, I was still following their parking rules. "Stop it," I whispered. I grabbed the wine bottle. I checked my phone one last time to make sure the file was accessible. I stepped out into the cold November air. The walk up the driveway felt like the longest walk of my life. The gravel crunched under my boots. I could see the house clearly now. The curtains in the dining room were open. The lights were on, casting a warm, inviting glow onto the front lawn. I could see them moving inside. I saw Kelsey throwing her head back, laughing at something Evan said. I saw my mother carrying a serving platter, her face arranged in that mask of perfect hostess beatitude. I saw Gordon pouring wine, playing the role of the benevolent patriarch. It looked like a commercial. It looked like a scene from a movie about the American dream. And it felt completely staged. From the outside, standing in the cold wind, the laughter didn't sound joyful. It sounded performative. It sounded like they were all working very hard to convince themselves that they were happy, that they were good people, that they deserved this fortress of comfort. I reached the front porch steps. I paused to wipe my feet on the welcome mat, another ingrained habit. As I did, my eyes fell on the small wicker table Gordon kept next to the porch swing. Usually, it held a potted plant or a seasonal decoration. Today, it held a stack of papers. They were neatly clipped together, but the wind had ruffled the top pages. I leaned in closer, my compliance officer instincts taking over. I didn't touch them. I knew better than to leave a fingerprint or disturb the order of Gordon's things. I just looked. The top brochure was glossy, featuring photos of a high-end condominium complex in Florida. Ocean View Estates. Luxury retirement living. The headline screamed in gold foil. Beneath that was a business card. It was thick, cream-colored cardstock. Robert Vance, Senior Wealth Management Advisor, Liquidity Solutions Asset Liquidation. And peeking out from under the card was a printout. It was a listing draft from a local real estate agency. I could only see the header and the first line. But it was enough. Coming soon to market. Exquisite Colonial in Cedar Ridge. My breath caught in my throat. They were selling the house. They weren't just living here illegally. They were planning to cash out. They were going to take the house Grandpa Frank had built, the house he had explicitly wanted to stay in the family trust, and they were going to turn it into a retirement fund for Gordon and a condo in Florida. That was why they had been so aggressive about the paperwork. That was why Gordon had been helping Mom with the estate. They needed clear title to sell, and they were rushing to do it before anyone asked too many questions. I stared at the brochure. A cold fury replaced the nervousness in my stomach. This wasn't just about them being mean to me anymore. This was theft. This was them stripping the carcass of my grandfather's legacy while the dirt on his grave was still fresh. I memorized the name on the card, Robert Vance. I memorized the logo of the real estate agency. I stood up straight. I smoothed the front of my blue dress. I adjusted my grip on the wine bottle. Any hesitation I had left evaporated. The little girl who wanted to be liked was gone. The woman who wanted justice had just clocked in. I walked to the front door. I could hear the murmur of voices just on the other side. They sounded so safe. They sounded so sure of themselves. I reached out and grasped the cold brass handle of the front door. I didn't knock. I never knocked. This was my home. Or at least, that was what the law said. I turned the handle and pushed, and then I saw it. My eyes drifted from Gordon's face to the hallway console table, just to his right. It was a mahogany table where they usually kept keys and mail. Today, it was cleared of clutter, except for a crystal vase of autumn flowers and one other object. It was a manila envelope. It was thick, perhaps 50 pages. It wasn't sealed. But what made my blood run cold was the writing on the front. In Gordon's sharp, angular handwriting, written in black marker, was a single name, Jasmine. The world seemed to slow down. The wind on my neck felt distant. All I could see was that envelope. Why was there a packet of legal-sized documents with my name on it sitting by the front door? If I was just a guest coming for turkey, why was there paperwork waiting in the staging area? A memory flashed in my mind, bright and urgent. 3 weeks ago, I was at my desk at Bright Hollow. I had received an automated notification from the county clerk's office. It was a standard alert I had set up years ago for any filings related to the Parker or Whitfield names. The email had been vague. It flagged a pending query on title transfer requirements and a download of a quitclaim deed template. At the time, I had brushed it off. I assumed Gordon was moving assets around for tax purposes, or perhaps refinancing a rental property, but I had mentioned it to my lawyer. Mr. Henderson, during our weekly check-in, I remembered Henderson's voice, gravelly and cynical over the phone. Be careful. Jasmine, if they need a signature from you to clear a title, they won't ask for it on a Tuesday morning. They will ambush you. They will wait until you are emotionally compromised. They will wait for a holiday, a wedding, or a funeral. They will put a glass of wine in your hand. Wait until you are desperate for their approval. And then slide the paper across the table and say, "It is just a formality." I looked back at the envelope. The brochures on the porch were for selling the house. The business card was for asset liquidation. And the envelope inside the door? That was the quitclaim deed. They weren't just kicking me out. They had planned to let me in, feed me, soften me up with false nostalgia, and then, before dessert, corner me into signing away my rights to the trust. They needed my signature to sell the house. That was the only reason I had been invited in the first place. But something had changed. Maybe they realized I was too volatile. Maybe they decided it was safer to forge the signature than to coerce it. Or maybe, just maybe, they had seen me pause on the porch and look at the brochures, and they panicked. Gordon saw me looking at the envelope. He shifted his weight, moving his body to block my line of sight. But it was too late. The data point had been captured. The compliance officer had logged the evidence. "You see," Janice said, walking closer to the door now. She stood next to Gordon, creating a united front. She looked sad, but it was a weaponized sadness. "If you want to step into this house, if you want to be part of this family, you need to learn how to behave like a member of this family. You need to trust us. Trust us." The irony was so sharp it almost cut my tongue. She wanted me to trust the people who had just assigned my seat to a stranger. Suddenly, the empty chair at the table made perfect, terrifying sense. It wasn't just an insult. It was a conditioning tactic. By taking away my seat, they were stripping me of my status. They were telling me, visually and physically, "You have no place here unless we grant it to you." If I had come inside, if I had begged for a folding chair, if I had sat at the corner of the table, I would have been psychologically primed to sign anything they put in front of me just to secure my position. I would have signed that deed just to prove I belonged. It was a masterclass in manipulation. It was psychological warfare disguised as a holiday gathering. Janice looked at me. waiting for me to break. She expected me to cry. She expected me to apologize. She expected me to ask what I needed to do to earn my way back inside. "Well," Gordon asked, "are you going to go, or do I need to call the police and tell them we have a trespasser?" He would do it. I knew he would. He would call the police on his own stepdaughter on Thanksgiving Day just to prove he held the power. I looked at Evan again. He was watching me, his face pale. He knew something was wrong. He knew families didn't do this, but he didn't move. I looked at Kelsey. She was checking her phone. I looked at the envelope one last time. My lawyer's advice roared in my ears. Do not engage. Do not argue. If you argue, you give them data. You give them your emotional state. Silence is the only thing they cannot spin. I had a choice. I could scream. I could point at the envelope and demand to know what was in it. I could tell Evan that the house he was standing in didn't belong to the man blocking the door. But if I spoke now, I was playing their game. If I spoke now, I was the crazy daughter causing a scene on the porch. I tightened my grip on the wine bottle. I felt the cold glass against my fingers. I looked Gordon dead in the eye. I didn't blink. I didn't frown. I let my face go completely blank, a mask of absolute neutrality. I channeled every ounce of professional detachment I had learned in 5 years of corporate auditing. I didn't say a word. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say screw you. I didn't say I know about the deed. I simply nodded, a slow acknowledgement of the transaction. Then, I turned around. The silence behind me was louder than any scream. I could feel their confusion radiating off their backs. They had expected a fight. They had prepared for a battle of words. They had no defense against a tactical retreat. I walked down the steps, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the stone. I walked past the brochures on the wicker table without looking at them. I walked toward my car, carrying the wine like a baton I had refused to pass. I could feel Gordon watching me. I knew he was waiting for me to turn back, to throw a rock, to do something that would justify his cruelty. I got into my car. I placed the wine on the seat. I locked the doors. Inside the house, they were probably letting out a breath they didn't know they were holding. They were probably congratulating themselves on handling the situation. They probably thought the danger was over. They had no idea that by closing that door, they had just sealed their own fate. They thought they had silenced me. They didn't realize that in my line of work. The silence is where you build the case. I picked up my phone. I saw the group chat. I saw the file attached. "You wanted me to act like family," I whispered to the empty car. "Okay. I will act like the family Grandpa Frank intended." I tapped the screen. I didn't need to enter the house to burn it down. I could do it from the street. I waited for 1 minute, 60 seconds, just enough time for them to turn away from the door, to walk back to the dining room, to pick up their wine glasses, to toast to their victory. Then, I initiated the sequence that would turn their quiet, polite dinner into a foreclosure hearing. I sat in the driver's seat of my Civic, the silence of the cabin wrapping around me like a second skin. Beside me, on the passenger seat, the $45 bottle of Pinot Noir sat upright. It looked ridiculous there, a dark glass soldier I had recruited for a battle that never happened. It was a prop for a play I had been fired from before the curtain even went up. I looked at it, and I felt a strange, cold detachment. 10 minutes ago, that bottle had been a peace offering. Now, it was just evidence of my own stupidity. My hands were no longer shaking. The tremors that had racked my body on the drive over, the nervous vibration of a daughter desperate for approval, had vanished. In their place was a stillness that felt absolute. It was the calm of a surgeon who has scrubbed in. It was the focus of a demolition expert who has stopped looking at the building as a home and started looking at it as a structural problem to be solved. I pulled my phone from the center console. The screen glowed bright in the dim gray light of the afternoon. I did not open social media. I did not call my best friend to cry. I opened the File Manager app, a folder I had named Project Pilgrim 3 months ago. It was a joke name, a bit of gallows humor I had shared only with myself. but now the contents felt anything but funny. I swiped through the documents, checking them one last time. I needed to be sure. In my line of work, you do not fire a shot unless you are certain the chamber is loaded. First, the photo. It was a high-resolution scan of a document I had found in the county archives. It was the original deed to the house, signed by Frank Whitfield in 1998. It clearly stated the terms of the trust. It clearly stated that upon his death, the property was to be held for the benefit of his direct descendants, with specific residency clauses that Gordon had conveniently ignored. Next, the tax receipts. I had 3 years of property tax records. They showed that the payments had been made not from Gordon's personal accounts, as he often bragged at parties, but from the dwindling cash reserves of the Whitfield Family Trust. He was living in my grandfather's house and using my grandfather's money to pay for the privilege, all while claiming he was the provider. Then, the email from Mr. Henderson, my lawyer. It was dated 2 weeks ago. The subject line was stark: risk of fraudulent conveyance. The body of the email was short and brutal. It outlined the attempt to file a quitclaim deed. The very same document I suspected was in that manila envelope inside the house. Henderson had written that any attempt to coerce a signature without full disclosure of the asset's value would constitute fraud under state law. And finally, the voicemail. I tapped the file. I didn't play it out loud. I didn't need to. I had memorized the waveform. I had memorized the cadence of the voice. It was from a pocket dial. Gordon had called me by mistake 4 weeks ago. He thought he had hung up, but the line had stayed open for 22 seconds. In the recording, the background noise was the clatter of silverware and the hum of a television. It was domestic. It was normal. And then, Gordon's voice cut through, clear and dismissive. Don't worry about the legality, Janice. I will get Jasmine to sign it on Thanksgiving. She is soft. She just wants to be part of the club. You give her a glass of wine, you smile at her, and she will sign anything. It is not like she has anyone backing her. Who is she going to call? She is alone. She is alone. I looked at the phone. That sentence had haunted me for a month. It had kept me awake at night. It had made me feel small and broken. But sitting here now, parked 70 feet away from the people who had said it, the sentence didn't hurt anymore. It clarified things. He was right. I was alone. But he was wrong about what that meant. Being alone didn't mean I was weak. It meant I had no collateral damage to worry about. It meant I didn't have to protect anyone but myself. I closed the file manager and opened the messaging app. I created a new group message. I added Sienna first. She was already inside, probably wondering where I was. She was the only one who deserved a warning, but there was no time for individual warnings now. She was collateral, but she was tough. She would survive the blast. Next, I added Aunt Paula. She was Janice's sister. She was a woman who hated confrontation and usually buried her head in the sand. But she loved Grandpa Frank. She needed to see what her silence had bought her. Then, Grandma Marjorie. She was 82 years old. Frail but sharp as a tack. She was currently sitting at the head of the table, or perhaps to the side, if Gordon had usurped that too. She had always been told that Gordon was taking care of things. It was time she saw exactly how he was taking care of them. Then, Uncle Wes. He was loud, obnoxious, and a gossip. If Wes knew, the entire state of Virginia would know by sunset. He was my broadcast tower. And then, Evan. I paused on his name. I pictured him sitting in my chair, unfolding his napkin, trying to make small talk with a family that viewed him as an asset rather than a person. He was about to marry my sister. He was about to tie his financial future to these people. He was innocent, mostly. He was just a guy who wanted a family, just like I did. By sending this to him, I was likely ruining his engagement. I was dropping a grenade into his relationship. I added him. It was an act of mercy, disguised as destruction. Better he knows now than after the wedding when his credit score is ruined by their schemes. Finally, I typed in one last name, Mrs. Larkin. She wasn't family. She was the neighbor. She was the head of the homeowners association. She was the woman Janice invited every year because Mrs. Larkin was the gatekeeper of social status in Cedar Ridge. Mrs. Larkin was a woman who prized integrity and community standards above all else. She was the one person Gordon could not intimidate and Janice could not manipulate. If Mrs. Larkin saw this, the facade of the perfect Price family wouldn't just crack. It would shatter. They would be pariahs at the country club. They would be whispered about in the grocery store. I added her to the thread. The list of recipients sat there at the top of the screen, a jury of their peers. My thumb moved to the text box. I didn't need to draft a long explanation. I didn't need to rant. I didn't need to use capital letters or exclamation points. The truth does not need to scream to be heard. I typed, "If you are sitting at that table, you should know what they prepared and who owns what." I read it over. It was simple. It was direct. It implicated everyone who needed to be implicated and warned everyone who needed to be warned. Then, I pressed the paperclip icon. I selected the file, Thanksgiving, PDF. The name of the file was so banal, it sounded like a menu. It sounded like a schedule of football games. It was a flat, unemotional file name for a document that contained the proof of 3 years of forensic accounting, legal analysis, and recorded betrayal. The file uploaded. The little blue circle spun for a second, then turned into a solid icon. Everything was ready. There was no sound. There was no explosion. The car didn't shake. The house didn't crumble. On the screen, the message bubble turned blue. Underneath it, in small gray letters, the word "delivered" appeared. It was done. The data packets were already invisible in the air, traveling through the cellular network, bouncing off towers, racing toward the devices sitting in pockets and purses inside that dining room. I lowered the phone to my lap. I took a breath. It was the first deep, full breath I had taken all day. I looked at the house. Nothing had changed on the outside. The wreath was still on the door. The shutters were still black. The world looked exactly the same as it had 10 seconds ago. But inside, the invisible fuse I had just lit was burning down. I imagined the scene. The phones were all on the table or in pockets. Someone, probably Kelsey or Uncle Wes, would hear the vibration first. A buzz against the wood, a ding from a purse. They would ignore it at first. "Not at the table," Janice would say, but then another phone would buzz, and another, and Mrs. Larkin's phone, which she always kept on loud because she had an elderly mother, would chime with that piercing, generic ringtone. Curiosity would win. It always does. One of them would look. One of them would slide their finger across the screen to unlock it. One of them would read the sentence. One of them would tap the PDF. I checked the time on my dashboard clock. 2:14 in the afternoon. The bomb had been delivered. Now, I just had to wait for the shockwave. I reached for the ignition key, but I didn't turn it yet. I wanted to see it. I wanted to see the moment the house of cards stopped defying gravity. I wanted to see who ran out first. I did not need to be inside the room to know that the air had changed. I did not need to see the faces to know that the temperature in the dining room had dropped from a cozy 72 degrees to absolute zero. The sequence of events was later described to me by 3 different people, and their accounts aligned with the precision of a police report. Inside the house, the silence of the pre-dinner ritual was broken not by a toast, but by a vibration. It started with Uncle Wes. His phone was sitting on the tablecloth. Right next to his fork, it buzzed, a harsh mechanical sound against the polished wood. He glanced at it, frowning, probably annoyed that someone was interrupting his holiday. Then, a second later, Sienna's phone lit up, then Aunt Paula's, then the piercing, digital chime of Mrs. Larkin's phone cut through the room like a siren. Janice, who was standing at the head of the table holding the carving knife, paused. She smiled that tight, strained smile of a hostess losing control of her environment. "Everyone," she said, her voice light but firm. "We have a rule. No phones at the table. We are here to be together." Usually, this would be the moment everyone apologized and slid their devices into their pockets, but nobody moved. The notifications were not random text messages. They were synchronized. Every screen in the room had lit up at the exact same second with the exact same preview. If you are sitting at that table, you should know what they prepared and who owns what. The curiosity was too strong. It was a magnetic pull. Uncle Wes was the first to break the protocol. He picked up his phone, his thick fingers swiping across the glass. "It is from Jasmine," he muttered, more to himself than the table. "Jasmine?" Janice asked, her smile faltering. "What is she sending? She just left." "She sent a file," Wes said. He tapped the screen. The room fell silent. But it was a different kind of silence now. It was the silence of a jury box right before the foreman stands up. One by one, the guests picked up their phones. Even Evan, who usually followed every rule Janice set, reached into his pocket and pulled out his device. Grandma Marjorie was sitting near the window. She was 82, and her hands shook slightly due to arthritis. She adjusted her reading glasses, squinting at the small screen. She was the slowest to open the file, but she was the one who understood it the fastest. She tapped the PDF. She zoomed in on the first image. It was the deed. She read the text. She read the trust clauses. She read the name of the beneficiary. She lowered the phone slowly to the table, the plastic clicking against the china. She took off her glasses and looked up. Her eyes, usually cloudy with age, were suddenly sharp. They locked onto Gordon. "Frank left this house to Jasmine?" she asked. Her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It was heavy with the weight of betrayal. Gordon froze. He was in the middle of pouring wine into Mrs. Larkin's glass. A single red drop spilled onto the white tablecloth, spreading like a fresh wound. "Marjorie," Gordon said, his voice smooth, lubricating the tension. "You are misreading it. Legal documents are confusing. That is an old draft. We have updated everything." "It is signed," Marjorie said. She did not blink. "It is signed and notarized by Frank. I know his signature. I watched him sign his checks for 40 years. This says the house belongs to the trust. And the trust belongs to the granddaughter." All eyes shifted to Evan. He was sitting in the chair that had been assigned to me. He was staring at his phone, his face draining of color. He had opened the tax documents. He was looking at the payment history, seeing the funds being siphoned from an account that wasn't supposed to be touched. He looked up, and his eyes met Kelsey's. "Kelsey," Evan said. His voice was hoarse. "This deed, it lists Jasmine Parker as the sole beneficiary with right of survivorship. It says I am sitting in a house that Gordon doesn't have the right to authorize residency for." Kelsey laughed. It was a terrible sound. It was high, brittle, and sounded like glass breaking. She reached out and touched Evan's arm, a gesture that looked more like a restraint than a comfort. "Oh, come on, Evan," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "You know Jasmine. She is dramatic. She probably made that on her computer. She is good with Photoshop or whatever. She is just jealous because she didn't get a seat." "It is a court record, Kelsey," Evan said. "It has a filing number. You can't Photoshop a county clerk filing number." "It is a misunderstanding," Janice interjected. She moved from the head of the table, walking toward Mrs. Larkin, trying to physically block the flow of information. "Jasmine is confused. She's been under a lot of stress at work. She gets these ideas in her head. We are handling the estate. It is very complicated." "It doesn't look complicated," Aunt Paula said. She was scrolling through the email from Mr. Henderson. "It looks like fraud." "Janice." The word hung in the air. Fraud. "Paula!" Janice gasped, clutching her pearls in a gesture so cliché it would have been funny if it weren't so tragic. "How can you say that? We are family." And then, it happened. The final nail in the coffin. Sienna had not said a word yet. She had been sitting quietly, reading the file, her face turning a dangerous shade of red. She didn't ask a question. She didn't argue. She simply pressed a button on her screen. She turned the volume up to the maximum level. The voicemail began to play. The sound of silverware clattering filled the room from the tiny speaker. It was a ghostly echo of the dinner they were currently trying to eat. And then, Gordon's voice cut through the air, distinct, arrogant, and undeniable. "Don't worry about the legality. Janice, I will get Jasmine to sign it on Thanksgiving. She is soft. She just wants to be part of the club. You give her a glass of wine, you smile at her, and she will sign anything. It is not like she has anyone backing her. Who is she going to call? She is alone." The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum where all the oxygen had been sucked out. Gordon stood there, the wine bottle still in his hand. His face, usually a mask of tanned confidence, had turned a mottled gray. He looked at the phone in Sienna's hand as if it were a venomous snake. He looked at Janice. Janice was staring at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Gordon realized he was losing the room. He did what narcissists always do when they are cornered. He attacked the victim. "Jasmine has issues," Gordon said, his voice rising, trying to regain dominance. "She is paranoid. She records people. Who does that? Who records their own family? She cuts tapes. She edits things to make us look bad. She is trying to ruin this holiday because she is miserable, and she wants everyone else to be miserable too." The chair legs scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. Mrs. Larkin stood up. Mrs. Larkin was a woman of small stature but immense dignity. She put her napkin on the table. She did not crumple it. She folded it. "Gordon," she said. Her voice was ice cold. "I have served on the community board for 20 years. I know a lot of people, and I know a bully when I hear one." She picked up her purse. "I will not sit at a table with a man who speaks about his daughter that way," she said. "And I certainly will not eat food paid for with stolen money." She turned to Janice. "Thank you for the invitation. Janice, do not invite me again." She walked to the coat rack. The sound of her putting on her coat was the only sound in the room. "Mrs. Larkin, please," Janice pleaded, stepping forward. "You can't leave. The turkey is ready. It is just a family spat." "This is not a spat, Janice," Aunt Paula said. She stood up too. She looked at her sister across the table, and for the first time in her life, she didn't look cowed. She looked disgusted. "You sat there," Paula said, her voice shaking. "You sat there and you let him talk about Jasmine like she was a prey animal. She is soft. She is alone. That is your daughter, Janice. Frank gave you everything, and you let this man pick the bones?" I didn't know he recorded that," Janice stammered, making the worst possible defense. "You knew he said it," Paula shouted. "You were on the other end of the line." Gordon slammed the wine bottle down on the table. "Enough," he bellowed. "This is my house. I will not be interrogated in my own dining room." "It is not your house," Evan said quietly. He stood up. He looked at the chair he had just vacated. He looked at the place card with his name on it. He picked it up and ripped it in half. "I thought this was a family," Evan said to Kelsey. "I thought you guys were, I don't know, good people." "We are," Kelsey cried, grabbing his hand. "Evan, baby, don't listen to them. Jasmine is crazy. She has always been jealous of us. She wants to break us up." Evan pulled his hand away. "She isn't breaking us up. Kelsey, she just turned on the lights." The front door exploded open. It wasn't the wind. It was Sienna. She burst out onto the porch, her face flushed with fury, her hands trembling. She didn't even grab her coat. She just ran. She needed to get out of that toxic box before she screamed the walls down. Inside, the structure had failed. The perfect Thanksgiving dinner. The one Janice had spent weeks planning. The one Gordon had orchestrated to secure his financial future. Was dissolving. There was no more keeping the peace. The peace had been a lie. The war had started, and the first casualty was the illusion that the Price family was anything other than a crime scene. I did not have to wait long. The front door of the house flew open again, but this time it wasn't a dignified exit. It was an escape. Sienna sprinted across the lawn. She wasn't wearing her coat. She was clutching her purse against her chest like a football, her heels sinking into the soft, dormant grass. She reached my car and yanked the passenger door open, practically throwing herself into the seat next to me. She slammed the door shut and exhaled, a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Drive," she said. "Just drive to the end of the block. I can't be near that house." I started the engine and rolled the Civic forward 50 yards, parking around the corner, out of direct line of sight but close enough to still see the driveway in the rearview mirror. "What is happening?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Sienna turned to me, her eyes wide. "They are losing their minds. Jasmine, it is like a bomb went off, a literal bomb." She ran a hand through her hair. "Gordon is pacing the living room like a caged animal. He is red. Purple. Actually, he is screaming that you ruined Thanksgiving. He keeps saying, 'She did this on purpose. She planned this to humiliate us.'" "He is right," I said calmly. "I did." "Good," Sienna said fiercely. "Because what I just saw? That wasn't a family dinner. That was a crime syndicate meeting. Evan. Poor Evan. He looks like he's been hit by a truck. He was standing by the door when I left, just staring at Kelsey. He kept asking, 'Why did you take her seat? Why is the house in her name?' And Kelsey, she is trying to spin it. Jasmine, she is clinging to him, crying, saying you always play the victim, that you are manipulative." "Does he believe her?" I asked. Sienna shook her head. "Not this time. You can't gaslight a court document. He saw the deed. He heard the voicemail." The look on his face, it wasn't confusion anymore. It was disgust. My phone, which had been sitting quietly on the dashboard, began to dance. It buzzed. Then it lit up. Then it buzzed again. A constant, frantic rhythm. Incoming call. Mom. Incoming call. Gordon. Text message from Kelsey. "You are a monster. How could you do this to Mom?" Text message from Gordon. "Pick up the phone, now. We need to talk about this misunderstanding before you do something you will regret." I watched the notifications stack up. They were long, rambling paragraphs of text. I could see snippets of them on the lock screen. Family loyalty misinterpretation, ungrateful, but I scanned them for one specific word. I looked for sorry. I looked for apologize. I looked for mistake. It wasn't there. Not once. They weren't sorry they had stolen from me. They weren't sorry they had locked me out. They were sorry they had been caught. They were panicking because they had lost control of the narrative. For 20 years, they had written the script of my life. Jasmine, the difficult one. Jasmine, the failure. Jasmine, the outsider. Now, I had taken the pen away, and they were terrified of what I was writing. "Are you going to answer?" Sienna asked, watching the phone vibrate against the plastic dashboard. "No," I said. "I am done talking. The file speaks for itself." The phone stopped buzzing for a moment. Then, a new number appeared on the screen. It wasn't a contact I had saved, but I recognized the area code. It was a number from Maryland. I stared at it. My heart, which had been steady since I sent the message, skipped a beat. "Who is that?" Sienna asked. "I think it is my dad," I said softly. "Dean, my biological father. The man who had divorced Janice when I was 5 and had spent the last 2 decades practicing the art of non-interference. He sent checks. He sent birthday cards. But he never sent himself. He always said he didn't want to cause friction with Gordon. He stayed in his lane, a passive observer of my life. I picked up the phone. "Hello?" "Jasmine." His voice was rough, like he had been coughing or crying. "It is Dad." "I know," I said. I got the file," he said. "Wes forwarded it to me. He thought I should know." Of course Wes did. Wes was probably forwarding it to CNN right now. "Okay," I said. "And?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of traffic in the background. He was driving. "I read it," Dean said. "I listened to the voicemail. Jasmine. I didn't know. I swear to God. I didn't know it was like that." "You didn't know what?" "Dad?" I asked, my voice sharpening. "You didn't know Gordon was a bully?" You didn't know Mom played favorites? Or you just chose not to look because it was easier for you? I thought, he stammered. I thought it was just personality clashes. I thought Gordon was strict. Sure. But I didn't know he was stealing from you. I didn't know they were trying to erase you. They took my seat. Dad, I said. Today, literally. They gave my chair to Evan and told me I wasn't family. That is not a personality clash. That is an eviction. Dean made a sound that was half groan, half sigh. I have been a coward, he said. I let them push me out, and then I let them push you down because I didn't want to fight Janice. I told myself you were tough. I told myself you could handle it. I can handle it, I said. I am handling it. I know you are, he said. But you shouldn't have to, not alone. Why are you calling, Dad? I asked. I needed to know. I couldn't accept comfort if it was wrapped in pity. Are you calling because you feel guilty? Or are you calling because the evidence is so undeniable that you can't pretend anymore? The question hung there, heavy and accusatory. Dean took a breath. I am calling, he said, his voice cracking. Because I saw the picture Sienna posted. Sienna? I looked at my cousin. She held up her phone, showing me a photo she had snapped through the window before running out. It was a blurry shot of me standing on the porch, looking at the closed door. While Gordon's back filled the frame, it was a lonely, devastating image. I saw you standing there, Dean said, locked out of the house your grandfather built, the house you have a right to, and I realized I can't be the guy who stays out of it anymore. I can't watch my daughter be treated like a stray dog on her own doorstep. My throat tightened. Tears, hot and unexpected, pricked at the corners of my eyes. I had been ready for anger. I had been ready for legal threats. I hadn't been ready for this, for the validation of my pain from the man who had ignored it for so long. I am coming down there, Dean said. I am on I-95. I will be there in 2 hours. Do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything. I am bringing my lawyer, Jasmine, a real one, not the strip mall guys Gordon uses. You don't have to do that, I said, though a part of me desperately wanted him to. Yes, I do, Dean said firmly. I am 20 years late, kiddo, but I am showing up for dinner. He hung up. I lowered the phone. I looked at Sienna. She was smiling, a fierce, triumphant smile. See, she said, the walls are crumbling. Gordon thought he could isolate you. He thought if he cut you off from the table, you would disappear. Instead, he just rallied the troops. I looked back at the house in the rearview mirror. I saw the front door open again. This time, it was Mrs. Larkin. She walked down the path, her head held high, marching toward her car. Then Aunt Paula, looking pale and shaken. The exodus had begun. Inside that house, the perfect Thanksgiving was dead. The turkey was getting cold. The wine was spilling. And the silence that Gordon and Janice had used as a weapon for so long was finally being filled with the noise of consequences. My phone buzzed again. Text from Evan. I am leaving. I can't stay here. I need to talk to you. Please. I showed the message to Sienna. He is waking up, she said. Maybe, I said. Or maybe he is just scared of getting sued. Either way, Sienna said, buckling her seatbelt. You won, Jasmine. You didn't just get a seat. You flipped the whole table. I put the car in drive. Not yet, I said. This was just the opening statement. Tomorrow, we start the discovery phase. I drove away from Cedar Ridge, leaving the empty chair behind. I didn't need it anymore. I was building my own table now. The morning after Thanksgiving is usually reserved for leftovers and shopping, in my line of work. However, Friday is a business day. Fraud does not sleep, and apparently, neither does the verification department of major financial institutions. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a cup of black coffee that had gone cold. My phone was silent for the first time in 12 hours. The barrage of texts from the night before had finally ceased around 3 a.m, leaving a digital wreckage of accusations and guilt trips in my inbox. I had not slept well. I had spent the night tossing and turning, replaying the look on Gordon's face when the voicemail played. At 9:15 in the morning, my phone rang. It was not a family member. It was an unknown number with a generic toll-free area code. I picked it up, expecting a telemarketer or perhaps a surveyor asking about my holiday shopping habits. "This is Jasmine Parker," I said, my voice raspy. "Good morning, Ms. Parker," a woman's voice said on the other end. She sounded professional, brisk, and slightly weary. "This is Sheila from the Fraud Prevention and Verification Department at Sovereign Key Bank. I am calling to verify a few details regarding the home equity line of credit application you submitted earlier this week." I froze. My hand tightened around the ceramic mug. "Excuse me?" I asked. "What application?" "The HELOC application," Sheila repeated, typing something in the background. "For the property at Cedar Ridge. We received the expedited filing on Tuesday, just before the holiday cutoff. We are trying to push the approval through as requested, but there is a flag on the signature verification that I need to clear up with you." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "Sheila," I said, my voice steadying into the cold, hard tone I used at Bright Hollow. "I did not submit an application for a home equity line of credit. I did not request an expedited filing, and I certainly did not sign anything on Tuesday." The typing stopped abruptly. "You didn't?" Sheila asked. Her tone shifted from bureaucratic boredom to alert caution. "Ms. Parker, I have a digital submission here. It includes a scan of a driver's license, an expired one, actually, which was the first flag, and a signature on the promissory note. The loan amount requested is $150,000. $150,000. The number hit me like a physical slap. That was not small change. That was a significant chunk of the equity in the house. "Can you describe the signature?" I asked. It is a bit shaky," Sheila admitted. "It looks like someone tried to copy the signature from the driver's license, but the loop on the P is inconsistent. That is why the system flagged it. We usually call to confirm on loans this size, especially when they are rushed before a long weekend." I closed my eyes. The pieces of the puzzle clicked together with a sickening sound. The blockade at the door, the aggressive attempt to keep me out of the house, the envelope with the quitclaim deed. I had thought the quitclaim deed was the end game. I thought they wanted me to sign over the house so they could sell it next month or next year. But I was thinking too small. Gordon didn't just want to sell the house eventually. He needed cash immediately. He had forged my signature. He had likely filled out the application online, uploaded a scan of an old ID he found in my childhood bedroom, and signed my name on the digital pad. He had timed it for the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, knowing the bank would be swamped and might rush the approval to get it off their desk before the holiday break. And the reason he kicked me out? The reason he was so desperate to keep me off the premises? He wasn't just being mean. He was terrified that a courier might show up. He was afraid the bank might call the landline. He needed me physically distant so he could control the verification process. If I had walked in, if I had sat at that table, and the phone rang, or if I had mentioned checking the mail, his entire house of cards would have collapsed right then and there. Thanksgiving wasn't a dinner, it was a heist. "Ms. Parker?" Sheila asked. "Are you still there?" "I am here," I said. "Sheila, listen to me very carefully. That application is fraudulent. I am the legal owner of that property via a trust. I did not authorize this. I want you to freeze that application immediately. Do not disperse any funds. Flag the account for criminal activity." I understand," Sheila said, sounding flustered. "I will escalate this to the Fraud Investigation Unit. We will need you to submit an affidavit of identity theft and a signature sample. You will have it within the hour," I promised. "And Sheila, keep a copy of that digital signature. Do not let it get deleted." I hung up the phone. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with adrenaline. This was no longer a family dispute. This was no longer about hurt feelings or a stolen chair. This was a felony. I walked to my laptop. I didn't even sit down. I stood at the counter and began to type. I drafted a formal letter to the bank. I scanned my current, valid driver's license. I scanned 3 documents I had signed recently: my lease, a tax return, and a work contract, to prove what my real signature looked like. Then I called Mr. Henderson. It was the day after Thanksgiving. His office was technically closed. I called his emergency cell number. He answered on the second ring. "Jasmine, is everything okay? Did they try to serve you with something?" "No," I said. "They tried to become me." I explained the call from the bank. I told him about the $150,000. I told him about the mismatched signature. There was a long silence on the line. When Henderson spoke again, his voice was grave. It lacked the usual cynical humor he used when discussing Gordon's antics. "Jasmine," he said, "you understand what this means, right? This isn't civil court anymore. This isn't a dispute over who gets the china cabinet. If Gordon submitted that application and signed your name, that is bank fraud. That is wire fraud if he used the internet. That is identity theft. These are federal crimes. We are talking about potential prison time." "I know," I said. "I want to know what my options are." "Your options are simple," Henderson said. "If you report this, the bank is required by law to file a suspicious activity report. The FBI or the local authorities will get involved. Once you pull this trigger, you cannot unpull it. You cannot ask the prosecutor to drop charges because he is family. The bank becomes the victim as much as you are. They will pursue it." He paused. "Are you ready for that?" he asked. "Are you ready to see your stepfather in handcuffs?" I looked out the window. I thought about the way Gordon had looked at me through the crack in the door. "You are not family." He had already decided I wasn't family. He had decided I was a resource to be exploited, a name to be forged, an obstacle to be removed. He hadn't treated me like a daughter. He had treated me like a mark in a con game. "He made his choice, Mr. Henderson," I said. He signed the paper. "I am just filing the report." "Okay," Henderson said. "Send the affidavit. I will call the bank's legal department personally. We are going to lock that house down so tight he won't be able to change a light bulb without a permit." I sent the email. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was Janice. I stared at the screen. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but I needed to hear it. I needed to hear the tone of her voice. I needed to know how deep the rot went. I swiped green. "Jasmine?" Her voice was high, thin, and trembling. It sounded like a wire stretched to the breaking point. "Hello, Janice," I said. I couldn't call her Mom. Not today. I just got off the phone with Gordon," she said. She was hyperventilating slightly. He is very upset. He says the bank called him. They said the loan is suspended. They said there is a fraud investigation." "That is correct," I said. "Jasmine, please," she cried. "You have to call them back. You have to tell them it was a mistake. Gordon. He was just trying to fix the roof. The house needs repairs. He didn't mean any harm. He was going to pay it back. He just borrowed your name for the paperwork because the trust is so complicated." "Borrowed my name?" I repeated. "Is that what we are calling forgery now? Borrowing?" "He is your stepfather," she screamed. The facade of the gentle mother cracked, revealing the desperate enabler underneath. "He raised you. He put food on the table. And you are going to send him to jail over a signature? Over money?" "I am not sending him to jail, Janice," I said coldly. "He sent himself to jail when he decided that my identity was his property. And tell me something. Did you know?" "What?" she gasped. "Did you know he was applying for a loan in my name? Did you know he was signing for me? Or were you just happy that he suddenly had money for that Florida condo I saw the brochure for?" I didn't know the details," she stammered. "I let him handle the finances. You know I don't look at the papers. Ignorance is not a defense, Janice," I said. "Not when you are driving the getaway car. If you knew, and you let him do it, you are an accomplice. And right now, The bank isn't just looking at him. They are looking at the household. I didn't know, she sobbed. I swear, Jasmine, I thought he had it under control. Well, I said, now I have it under control. I hung up. I didn't believe her. Or maybe I did. Maybe she really was that willfully blind. It didn't matter. Her silence had bought his crimes for years. Now, the bill was due. My phone pinged with a text. It was Kelsey. Kelsey, you have officially lost it. Mom is having a panic attack. Gordon is throwing up in the bathroom. Are you happy? You are blowing up the whole family over a misunderstanding. You are being so dramatic. Fix this. I looked at the words. Dramatic. Misunderstanding. The gaslighting was so automatic for her. She couldn't conceive of a world where Gordon was the villain and I was the victim. In her world, I was always the problem. I typed back. My thumbs moved fast. Jasmine, I am not doing anything. The law is doing it. And I am not making it up. The bank has the document. He forged my signature. Kelsey, that isn't drama. That is a felony. I am not doing this to hurt you. I am doing this to clarify who actually owns my life. I hit send. Then, another message came through. A separate thread. It was Evan. I hesitated. I hadn't heard from him since Sienna said he was leaving the house. Evan, I am at a hotel in town. I couldn't stay there. I watched Gordon scream at your mother after the bank called. I have never seen anything like that. 3 dots appeared. He was typing for a long time. Evan, I am sorry. Jasmine, I really am. I sat in your chair. I ate the food. I let them tell me you were the crazy one. I didn't know I was sitting in a stolen seat. I feel sick. I feel like I was just a prop they used to fill the space so the picture looked pretty. I broke off the engagement an hour ago. I can't marry into this. I read the message twice. I was just a prop. That was it. That was the tragedy of the Price family. We were all props. I was the scapegoat prop. Kelsey was the golden child prop. Evan was the successful son-in-law prop. Janice was the dutiful wife prop. Gordon was the director, moving us around the stage, rewriting our lines, forging our signatures, convinced that he owned the entire production. But he forgot one thing. Props don't call the FBI. Props don't hire forensic accountants. And props definitely do not hit send on an email that freezes the assets of the director. I texted Evan back. Jasmine, you didn't know, but now you do. Get out while you can. Evan, the show is getting canceled. I put the phone down. The house was quiet. The coffee was cold. But for the first time in my life, I felt completely, terrifyingly safe. The worst had happened. They had tried to steal everything from me, and I had stopped them. The scary part wasn't that I was alone. The scary part was realizing that I had been alone the entire time, sleeping in a house full of thieves who called themselves family. I stood up and walked to the window. The sky was gray, typical for November in Virginia, but it looked clear to me. The investigation had officially begun, and unlike Gordon, I had nothing to hide. The true power of a compliance officer is not that we know the rules better than anyone else. It is that we know what happens when you break them. For the past year, I had been holding a card close to my chest that even my mother did not know existed. When Grandpa Frank died, everyone assumed the will was a simple transfer of assets. Gordon certainly did. He saw house and money and assumed that because he was the patriarch, he would naturally steer the ship. But Grandpa Frank was a builder. He understood structural integrity, and he understood rot. He had not just left me the house. That would have been too simple, and too easy for Gordon to challenge in probate court. Frank had established the Whitfield Family Trust. It was a fortress of legal language designed to survive a nuclear war, or worse, a greedy son-in-law. And inside that trust, buried in Article 4, Section C, was a provision I like to call the nuclear option. It stated clearly, in the event that any resident or beneficiary attempts to encumber, mortgage, or sell trust assets through fraudulent means, or without the express written consent of the trustee, their right to residency shall be immediately terminated. And here was the kicker. The detail I had never spoken aloud to anyone, not even to Sienna. I was not just the beneficiary. I was the successor trustee appointed to enforce the rules in the event of a dispute. Gordon thought he was fighting a disobedient stepdaughter. He did not realize he was fighting the landlord. Saturday morning broke with a gray, steel-colored sky. I sat at my desk, my laptop open. I did not feel the need to scream. I did not feel the need to drive over there and throw things. Rage is inefficient. Paperwork is lethal. I opened a blank document. I did not start with, "Dear Mom." I started with the standard legal header. Notice of breach of fiduciary duty and termination of residency privileges. I typed steadily. The rhythm of the keys was the only sound in my apartment. I cited the Sovereign Key Bank loan application. I cited the forged signature. I cited the specific clause of the trust that Gordon had violated. I did not use emotional language. I did not say, "How could you?" I simply stated the facts. Due to the attempted fraudulent encumbrance of the property located at 4402 Oak Lane, the conditional residency granted to Gordon Price and Janice Price is under review. You are hereby ordered to cease all financial transactions related to the property. You are required to surrender all physical keys, access codes, and original documents to the trustee's legal counsel within 48 hours. I read it over. It was cold. It was sterile. It was perfect. I converted it to a PDF. I attached it to an email. I copied Mr. Henderson. I copied the bank. And then I sent it to Gordon and Janice. The reaction was immediate. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Gordon. I did not answer. 2 minutes later, a voicemail popped up. I played it on speakerphone while I calmly poured myself a second cup of coffee. "Jasmine!" Gordon's voice was distorted by rage. He was shouting so loud the microphone was clipping. "Who do you think you are? Sending me a legal threat? I am your father. I raised you. You are trying to evict your own mother? You are sick. You are a vindictive, hateful little girl. I am going to sue you for harassment. I am going to drag you through the mud. Do you hear me? Everyone is going to know what you are doing to this family." I took a sip of coffee. Threat noted. I thought, harassment claim unfounded. I didn't reply. I didn't text back. I simply forwarded the voicemail file to Mr. Henderson with a note. Additional evidence of hostility. Please add to the file. Gordon, realizing I wasn't picking up, changed tactics. He went public. He started a group text with the entire extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even people we hadn't seen in 10 years. Gordon, I want everyone to know that Jasmine is trying to kick her mother out of her home on Thanksgiving weekend. She is using some legal loophole Frank left behind to destroy us. She is mentally unstable. We need the family to talk sense into her before she does something unforgivable. My phone started buzzing with incoming messages from confused relatives. Uncle Bob. Jasmine, is this true? Cousin Clara. Wait, you are evicting Aunt Janice? It was a classic triangulation tactic. Make me the villain. Make me the aggressor. Shame me into submission by using the weight of family opinion, but I wasn't playing by family rules anymore. I was playing by trust rules. I replied to the group chat once. I didn't defend myself. I didn't argue about my mental stability. I pasted a single screenshot. It was the letter from the bank's fraud department, confirming the forged signature and the halted loan application for $150,000. Underneath it, I wrote, "The eviction is not because of a loophole. It is because of a felony. If anyone has questions about why the residency is being terminated, please ask Gordon why he signed my name to a 6-figure loan application on Tuesday." The group chat went silent. It is amazing how quickly family loyalty evaporates when the word felony is introduced. But Gordon wasn't done. He was desperate. He played his final card. He drove to Grandma Marjorie's house. I found out because Sienna called me. Breathless. "He is there," Sienna said. "He is at Grandma's. He is trying to get her to sign a statement saying Frank was senile when he made the trust. He is yelling at her. Jasmine." My blood ran cold. Grandma Marjorie was 82. She didn't need this. "I am going over there," I said. grabbing my keys. No, Sienna said. Wait, you don't have to. Why? Because Grandma just walked out onto the front lawn, Sienna said, her voice filled with awe. And she is holding a garden hose. I paused. What? Just listen, Sienna said. She must have held her phone up to the window. I heard shouting in the background. It was Gordon. Marjorie, you have to help us. Jasmine is ruining everything. She is dishonoring Frank's memory. And then, I heard Grandma Marjorie's voice. It wasn't the wavering, soft voice of an old woman. It was the voice of the woman who had been married to Frank Whitfield for 50 years. Gordon Price, she said. Her voice carried through the phone clearly. Frank didn't leave that house to Jasmine because he was senile. He left it to her because he was the only one who saw who was being abandoned. Silence. He told me, Marjorie continued, her voice trembling with repressed anger. He told me 10 years ago, he said, Marjorie, that girl is invisible in her own house. Gordon treats her like a servant, and Janice treats her like a ghost. When I die, I am going to make sure she is the only one who has a roof over her head that they can't take away. I stopped breathing. I stood in my hallway, my hand gripping the doorframe. Grandpa Frank had seen it, all those years, when I thought I was hiding my pain, when I thought I was doing a good job of being invisible. He had seen me. He had noticed the way I was silenced. He had noticed the inequality. And he had built this trust not just as a gift, but as a shield. So don't you talk to me about dishonoring Frank, Marjorie shouted. The only person dishonoring Frank is the thief standing on my grass. Get off my property. Gordon, before I turn the sprinklers on. I heard a car door slam, then the sound of an engine revving aggressively and peeling away. He is gone, Sienna whispered. Grandma is a badass. I wiped a tear from my cheek. It was the first time I had cried in years. But it wasn't a sad tear. It was the relief of being seen. Back at the house on Oak Lane, the walls were closing in on Janice. She called me an hour later. Her tone had changed completely. Gone was the hysterical defender. In its place was the terrified realization of a woman who had bet her entire life on the wrong horse. Jasmine, she whispered. He is tearing the office apart. He is looking for the original will. He says he is going to burn it. He can burn whatever he wants. Janice, I said calmly, the lawyers have the certified copies. The county has the digital records. Destroying paper doesn't destroy the truth anymore. That is why I work in compliance. He is scaring me, she admitted. It was a whisper, so quiet I almost missed it. I know, I said, and I did know. I had been scared of him for 20 years. But you have a choice, Mom. You can stay there and help him look for matches, or you can pack a bag and leave. If you leave, I will help you. If you stay, you are choosing to go down with the ship. I don't know where to go, she cried. You figure it out, I said. I am the trustee, not the babysitter. It was harsh, but it was necessary. She needed to feel the consequence of her passivity. She needed to understand that I wasn't going to swoop in and fix the mess she had allowed to happen. Meanwhile, the fallout hit Kelsey, my sister, the golden child, the one who had never been told no in her life, was currently having a meltdown on social media. She had posted a vague, tearful status about betrayal and toxic siblings, but the comments weren't going her way. People in our small town talk. Mrs. Larkin had talked. The rumor about the forged loan was spreading. Kelsey texted me, "You ruined my wedding. Evan won't talk to me. He is at a hotel. Fix this. Jasmine, tell him you lied." I didn't reply to her. I replied to the situation. I sent a formal email to Kelsey, separate from the parents. Subject: Notice regarding occupancy. Dear Kelsey, as an adult resident of the property, you are also subject to the trust's rules, while you are not implicated in the fraud directly. Your continued residence is contingent on the primary occupants. If Gordon and Janice are evicted, the house will be secured. You have 30 days to make alternative arrangements. It was the boundary she had never encountered. A hard stop. She called Evan. I know this because Evan texted me a screenshot of their conversation later. Kelsey, you have to come back. You have to tell Jasmine she is crazy. You are my fiancé. You are supposed to protect me. Evan, protect you from what? From the truth? Your stepfather forged a signature to steal equity from your sister, and you are mad at her for catching him? Kelsey, it is just money. We are family. Evan, it isn't just money. It is character. And honestly, Kelsey, I watched you laugh when they took her seat. I can't unsee that. I am not coming back to the house. I am going back to the city. The wedding was off. The power couple image was shattered. Gordon returned to the house after his failed attempt to bully Grandma Marjorie. He found the legal notice I had sent. He found the locked bank accounts. He found a wife who was cowering in the kitchen and a daughter who was screaming into her pillow upstairs. He realized then that his shouting wasn't working. He realized that for the first time in his life, he couldn't intimidate his way out of a problem. He sent me one last email that evening. Jasmine, let's make a deal. We can sell the house and split the money. 50-50. You get half. Just drop the fraud claim. I looked at the screen. He was bargaining. He was trying to cut a deal with the prosecutor. I didn't hesitate. I didn't feel a flicker of temptation. Half the money would have been a fortune for me. It would have paid off my student loans. It would have bought me a new car. But this wasn't about money. It was about limits. I typed my reply. To Gordon Price. From Jasmine Parker, Trustee. There are no deals. The trust does not negotiate with parties who have breached their fiduciary duty. You have 48 hours to surrender the keys and vacate the premises, or the eviction will proceed with law enforcement assistance. The fraud report with the bank has already been filed and cannot be withdrawn. Regard, Jasmine. I hit send. I sat back in my chair. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across my apartment. I was alone, eating a sandwich for dinner. It wasn't a turkey feast. It wasn't a banquet. But as I took a bite, I realized something. The food tasted good. It tasted like mine. The phone didn't ring again that night. They finally understood. You can't argue with a wall. And you certainly can't argue with a woman who has receipts, a law degree, and 100 years of suppressed anger channeled into a single. Perfect legal filing. The end of a war does not sound like a cannon blast. In my case, it sounded like the soft ping of an email notification arriving in my inbox at 10 o'clock on a Monday morning. I was sitting at my desk at Bright Hollow, staring at a spreadsheet that I couldn't focus on. My phone lay face up next to my keyboard. The email was from the Fraud Investigation Unit at Sovereign Key Bank. The subject line was succinct. Status update. Account frozen pending legal review. I opened it. The body of the email confirmed what I had suspected but hardly dared to hope for. The bank had formally classified the home equity line of credit application as suspicious. They had flagged the signature discrepancies. They had traced the IP address of the submission to the router inside the house at Cedar Ridge. And most importantly, they had forwarded the file to federal authorities for potential prosecution regarding wire fraud. 5 minutes later, a second email arrived. This one was from Mr. Henderson. He had been busy. He had pulled the records from the county clerk's draft filings. It turned out the quitclaim deed, the one I had seen in the envelope, had not just been sitting on the table. A digital intent to file had been initiated 3 days prior. Pending a physical signature, the person listed as the preparer on the metadata was Gordon Price. The trap had not just been set. The jaws had already snapped shut. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I felt a heavy, somber sense of finality. This was it. The evidence was irrefutable. The intent to defraud was documented. The misunderstanding defense was dead in the water. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Henderson. "Execute it," I said. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Once we send the notice of termination, the clock starts. They will have 30 days to vacate, but the loss of privilege status is immediate. It is aggressive. Jasmine. They tried to steal $150,000 of equity from a trust meant to protect me," I said, my voice steady. They didn't worry about being aggressive. They didn't worry about leaving me homeless. Execute the clause. Done, Henderson said. The courier is already en route. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety. I waited for the explosion. I waited for Gordon to drive his Mercedes through the front doors of my office building. But the explosion didn't come. Instead, there was a strange, suffocating silence. It wasn't until 6 p.m. that the first crack appeared. I was walking to my car in the parking garage when my phone rang. It was Gordon. I let it ring. He called again immediately. I let it ring again. Then, a text message. Gordon, we need to meet. Now, I replied. All communication must go through Mr. Henderson. Gordon, you can't hide behind a lawyer forever. I am at the house. Come here and say it to my face. I stopped walking. I stood between two concrete pillars in the garage. He was trying to bait me. He wanted me on his turf, in his living room, where he could use his height and his volume to make me feel small. But I wasn't small anymore, and it wasn't his living room. Jasmine, I will be there in 20 minutes. I'm bringing a witness. I called Sienna. She was at my apartment in 10 minutes, looking like she was ready for a street fight. We drove to Cedar Ridge in silence. When we pulled up to the house, it looked different. The holiday decorations were still up, but the warmth was gone. The windows looked dark. The for sale brochures on the porch were gone, likely swept away by the wind or hastily hidden in the trash. Gordon was waiting on the porch. He wasn't wearing his usual crisp suit. He was wearing a wrinkled button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled up haphazardly. He looked older. He looked deflated. Janice was standing behind him, leaning against the doorframe as if she couldn't support her own weight. I walked up the path, Sienna a step behind me. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs. I didn't go up to the level where they stood. I stayed on the pavement. This was my property, but I didn't need to enter the structure to own it. You did it, Gordon said. His voice was raspy. He waved a piece of paper in his hand, the notice Henderson had sent. You actually did it. You are kicking us out. I am enforcing the trust, I said. The trust that you violated when you forged my signature. It was a bridge loan, Gordon shouted, his voice cracking. I was going to pay it back. I just needed liquidity for a business deal. I was doing it for the family. You were doing it for yourself, I said. And you used my name as collateral without asking. That is not family. Gordon, that is theft. He laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. Family? You talk about family? Look at you, standing there with your lawyer's letters and your cold face. You were never family. Jasmine, I told you that on Thursday. You are just a tenant we tolerated. He waited for the blow to land. He waited for me to flinch, to cry, to beg for his validation one last time, but the words bounced off me. They sounded hollow, like a recording played in an empty room. You are right, I said quietly. I wasn't family to you. I was an asset. I was a servant. I was a punching bag. But the funny thing is, Gordon, the man who built this house, he was my family, and he left the keys to me. So you can scream all you want about who belongs here. But the law says the only person who doesn't belong here is the man who tried to steal the roof. Gordon opened his mouth to scream again, but the fight went out of him. He looked at the paper in his hand. He looked at the house he had preened over for years. He realized, finally, that the audience had left the theater. His performance was over. He turned around and walked into the house. Slamming the door, Janice didn't move. She stood there in the cold evening air, shivering in her thin sweater. She looked at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She looked terrified. Jasmine, she said softly. I looked at my mother. I saw the woman who had watched me sit at the kids' table for 29 years. I saw the woman who had looked the other way when Gordon belittled me. I saw the woman who had slid my place card off the table 3 days ago. Jasmine, she repeated. Do I have a chance? If I leave him? If I pack my bags? Can I stay? It was the question of a survivor, But it was also the question of a coward. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for shelter. I felt a pang of pity, sharp and deep. But I also remembered the voice on the phone. Her voice, telling me to apologize to the bank, telling me to fix it for Gordon. "Mom," I said, "I can't save you from the choices you made." "But I am your mother," she whispered. "I know," I said, "and that is why this hurts. But I don't need you to choose me. Mom, I stopped waiting for that a long time ago. I just need you to stop choosing the person who hurts me. If you stay with him, you are choosing him. If you leave, you can call me. But you can't live here. Not right now. The house needs to be cleaned. And I don't mean the dust." She stared at me. She realized then that I wasn't punishing her. I was simply setting a boundary. I was closing the door she had left open for too long. She nodded slowly. She turned and followed Gordon inside. I walked back to the car. Sienna reached over and squeezed my hand. "You okay?" she asked. "I am better than okay," I said. "I am free." The final domino fell an hour later. I was back at my apartment when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Evan. "Evan, can I come over?" He arrived 10 minutes later. He looked exhausted. He wasn't wearing his expensive suit. He was wearing jeans and a hoodie, carrying a duffel bag. He stood in my hallway, looking awkward. "I broke up with her," he said. He didn't need to say the name. "I am sorry, Evan," I said, and I meant it. Breakups are hard, even when they are necessary. "Don't be," he said. She didn't get it, even at the end. I told her about the fraud. I told her about the lies. She just kept saying that we needed the money for the wedding, that Gordon would fix it, that you were just being jealous. She looked me in the eye and said, "Who cares where the money comes from if we get the house?" He shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "That was it," he said. "That was the moment. I looked at her and I realized, if she needs to rob her sister to build a future, that is not a future, that is a crime scene." He looked at me. "I am sorry I took your seat. Jasmine, I really am. It is just a chair. Evan," I said. "You stood up when it mattered," he smiled. A sad, tired smile. "I am going to stay with my brother in the city, but I wanted to tell you, you were the only honest person in that house." He left. I closed the door. The silence in my apartment wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. I looked at the clock. It was 8 in the evening. It was technically Saturday, but it felt like the Thanksgiving I never had. "Okay," I said to the empty room. "Time for dinner." I didn't cook a turkey. I didn't have the energy. I ordered 3 large pizzas. I bought a cheap bottle of wine, not the $45 Pinot, just a regular table red. I texted Sienna, "Come over. Bring Grandma if she's awake." I texted a few friends from Bright Hollow, the other compliance officers who understood the beauty of a well-executed audit. By 9 o'clock, my small apartment was full. It wasn't a magazine cover. The furniture was mismatched. There was no crystal chandelier. We were eating pizza off paper plates. Sienna was sitting on the floor. Grandma Marjorie was sitting in my favorite armchair, holding a slice of pepperoni pizza and telling a story about Grandpa Frank that made everyone laugh. The room was loud. It was chaotic. It was warm. I stood in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, watching them. I looked at the small dining table I had pushed against the wall to make room. There were 4 chairs. 3 were occupied by my friends. 1 was empty. I had left it empty on purpose. Sienna walked over, holding her wine glass. She followed my gaze to the empty chair. "Who are you saving that for?" she asked. "Is Dean coming?" "No," I said. "Dad is coming tomorrow. That chair isn't for him." "Is it for them?" she asked, tilting her head toward the direction of Cedar Ridge. "No," I said firmly. "They don't get a seat here. Not anymore." I looked at the empty chair. It wasn't a symbol of loss. It wasn't a sad reminder of the family I didn't have. It was a reminder of the space I had created. For 29 years, I had fought for a seat at a table where I wasn't wanted. I had twisted myself into knots, silenced my voice, and swallowed my pride just to occupy 12 inches of space on a bench. I had thought that if I just sat still enough, if I was good enough, the chair would become mine. But I was wrong. The chair was never the prize. The table was the trap. The moment they took the chair away, the moment Gordon blocked the door and told me I wasn't family, he didn't break me. He liberated me. He forced me to go out and build my own table. And looking at this room, full of people who believed me, people who defended me, people who loved me without requiring a credit check or a forged signature, I realized that this was where I belonged. That chair, I said to Sienna, smiling, is for me. It is a reminder that I never have to sit in a seat that was given to me out of pity. I only sit where I am respected. Sienna clinked her glass against mine. Amen to that, cousin. Happy Friendsgiving. Happy Friendsgiving, I said. I took a sip of wine. It tasted better than the expensive bottle I had left in the car. It tasted like the truth. I walked over to the table. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't wait for a signal. I pulled out the empty chair. The legs scraped against the floor. A sound of ownership. I sat down. The conversation around me flowed on, easy and laughter-filled. Nobody told me I was ruining the mood. Nobody told me to be quiet. I looked around the room, taking a mental snapshot. The house in Cedar Ridge was dark and cold, filled with boxes and regrets. But here, in this small apartment, the lights were bright. The stolen chair had led me to the real table, and for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please leave a comment below telling me your city or country, and let's share our thoughts on Jasmine's journey. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Jane Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it.